Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy. The Nag Hammadi Scriptures, part 16, in which I will pick up where Edward left off in part 15. And, alright, so today, our beverage is just a simple cup of coffee. Cheers. And our incense, going with a little bit of a Middle Eastern theme, appropriate since Nag Hammadi is in Egypt. Nag Hammadi is a city, a village, or a town. Definitely not that thing that I said accidentally. You ever try to say two things at the same time? Like, oh, what a shame, what a pity, what a shitty. Turns out you can do something funny with city and town, as we've all just learned. Let's see, do we get any information about this particular flavor? I have like a bunch of different types of incense from this brand, and it doesn't say what the flavor is. All right. Oh, Oud Bharat, maybe, which of course, Bharat is what they call India in India. You know, for the folks who don't call it India in India. It's still popular to call it India, but I think they made some official declaration a couple years ago that it shall henceforth be Bharat, not the Republic of India. That's fair. I think what happened there was, and I might be a little off, but the Greeks came and they were like, what's this? You know, what do you call this? You know, and I think the locals thought they were talking about the river they were standing next to at the time, so they said Sindhu, and so the Greeks were like, Sindhu, Indus. We'll call this Indus, the Indus River, and so India kind of evolved from that, as well as Hindu. Those words came from outside. India and Hindu, words that came from outside, based on the Sindhu River. Basically, I don't know exactly the specifics, but it's Bharat, Bharat, if you ask a lot of people. Right. So Oud Bharat, that's what we got here. And next, what we do is we read a little bit of Living Gnosis by Tao Malachi. We'll read one paragraph, picking up right where we left off. By the way, if you would like to start at the beginning of the Nag Hammadi recitals here on Chicken Philosophy, you can do so by clicking here. That'll take you to the playlist. Okay, so we're in the section called Christian Gnosticism. Here we go. One generation of apostles and disciples gave way to another. One season between that and the yarmulke, people are going to get the wrong idea about me. Or the right idea. And within a few generations, there were literally hundreds of different versions of Jesus' teachings, the events of his life, and interpretations of the meanings behind them, hence hundreds of gospels. Each reflected different views and experiences of Jesus, as he's been called in English for the past few hundred years. Yesu is an older name. Yeshua is the one I prefer. Right. Essentially, original Christianity was a living experience of the Christos. Parentheses, light, hyphen, presence, end parentheses. I've got a nitpick with whoever's translating, editing, decided that means anointed. Anointed one. Christos, anointed one. It's a very specific meaning. It has nothing to do with light or presence. Unless you're interpreting the poetry. Logos, parentheses, word, and parentheses. That's closer to an accurate translation. Sorry. And Sophia, parentheses, wisdom, end parentheses. A common misnomer is people will say that philosophy is love of knowledge. No, love of wisdom. Specifically, Sophia, as in the lady from Gnosticism. So, I don't know. Anyway. And in this sense, represented a living enlightenment experience. I always found it interesting that wisdom is personified as a lady as well in the book of Proverbs. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that? The connection between the Greek Sophia and the Hebrew, is it Chokmah? No, I don't know. Let's find out. According to our trusty stone edition of the Tanakh in Mishlei, or Proverbs chapter 8, wisdom, sometimes called Lady Wisdom, is called Chokmah. In the original Hebrew, it's not Lady Chokmah, it's just Chokmah, I think because it's feminine. I don't know, maybe at some point Christians started calling it Lady Wisdom, but as in the famous line, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So in that context, talking about her, she says, she stands, she does all these things. Wisdom does all these things. So, Tree of Life, please. So the gray one over there, next to the white one. Which is interesting because that's basically mostly associated with the Yod in Yod He Vav He, which is the most fathery part of that patriarchal name. In other words, the Yod is the father, the He is the mother, the Vav is the son, and the second He final is the He final. There's no He final, but in the Tetragrammaton there's a He final. If you're Anyway, what am I talking about? So it's very masculine in the context of the Tree of Life, but the word wisdom itself is feminine. I mean, the Sephira called Chokmah is masculine. It's kind of most associated with God the Father. But the word itself is feminine. It's the word Solomon uses, or whoever wrote Mishlei, uses to refer to this woman. So he's in this whole thing. There's the harlot, which don't listen to the harlot. She's standing in the middle of the city telling everybody, come unto me. Listen to Lady Wisdom, or Wisdom. She's standing in the middle saying, come unto me. And it's kind of like, now wait a minute. Why are they both doing the same thing? Why are they both standing in the middle of the city? I mean, that seems like it might get kind of confusing. Like, which lady is it? Is there a way to, like, is there a hair color or something I should keep an eye out for to know the difference? Anyway, that's our reading from one paragraph of Living Gnosis, just to kind of review for those who are already familiar, and to become familiar for those who are unfamiliar with kind of the general overview that is most commonly all-pervasive among people who talk about Gnosticism at all in any context. You'll find a little bit of variation, and of course there's Thelema. Basically, when the Ordo Templi Orientis was reestablished, it was done based on a model that Pope Runyon had done a few years before that. In other words, he created a church and then established his order within that church. So he suggested, apparently, according to him, in my interview with him, who's a friend of my dad's. But anyway, so what they did was they established the Ecclesiastica Gnostica Catholica, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what it was called. The Church of Universal Gnosticism, or the Church of Catholic Gnosticism, or Universal Knowing, I guess, if you translated all the Greek. But if you translate one and not the other, it's like, well, if you Catholic Gnosticism, it's funny. It's a funny idea. And they do a thing where a topless lady comes in with semen cookies. And so that's a very specific definition of Gnosticism that is not the definition of Gnosticism that I would care to associate with the Nag Hammadi recitals on chicken philosophy. It's just a silly segment inside of a YouTube channel. No offense to any Thelemites. I've often, if I had a nickel for every Gnostic mass they've invited me to, then I would have, I don't know, at least 40 cents. But I don't know why the superego. I mean, okay, what am I talking about? Freud has this thing where there's the ego, the nefesh, and the superego, and at a very surface basic first glance, then you might let's bring up the Tree of Life, attribute that the body's down here. That's not one of these three. The guf. So the nefesh is like maybe the id to Western ceremonial magicians, not to Hebrew Kabbalists. The nefesh is the soul, if you're speaking Hebrew and talking about actual Jewish Kabbalah. But according to the Christian, pagan, European Kabbalists, who aren't super popular among the traditional Jewish Kabbalists, but one borrows from the other, but it's a one-way flow. Yeah. The point is, the Ruach, which is kind of like everything from below dot, everything, the red and blue down to the purple. So these, is it 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, those 6. On some diagrams are referred to as the Ruach, but the Yesod is the nefesh, even though it's part of the ruach. And then the neshama is the supernals, which is most specifically the lesser neshama is the black one here, the binah, that's associated with the mother goddess. I mean, like a Shira type Abrahamic goddess back when that was a thing. But anyway, what am I talking about? Oh yeah, Binah. So the neshama. So the neshama is not a one-to-one correspondence with the superego. The superego, I mean, again, I'm not a Freudian. I only have a cursory knowledge. But from my understanding it's society.
Fuck society.
So putting society on the level of the higher self, and that the ego, has to be directed by the superego, and then the nefesh, which is the id. And I mean, if you just plug the Freudian three self thing onto the Tree of Life or those Hebrew ideas, then I don't know. Some people might see it that way. I don't. For me, the superego is something more likely below, or at least it's something in the, I don't know what I'm pointing at. I can't see. You can see it. I can't see it. But anyway, something in the interplay between the astral plane and the material world, where people are being born and dying and writing books and having 100 different versions of Christianity and all this stuff that people do, having consensus reality. And these days, depending on where you look, it's a little more popular to question authority, question the way that we've been doing things for the past 100, 200, 500,000 years, whoever we is in this context. There's various we's, of course. So the superego should be met with skepticism, I'd say. Okay, so we're going to pick up where we left off now in Nag Hammadi. We're reading the Tripartite Tractate. Let's hit it. This is a section called Spirit. As always, I don't know if that section was labeled beforehand, or I don't think it was. I think that the people who put this together, divided everything into sections so it just wouldn't come across as just continuous writing like a novel. It's like, oh, this is a section called The Spirit from the Tripartite Tractates. Let's do that Spirit song. I mean, I know there's more than one by John Michael Talbot.
Holy Spirit, Lord of light, from the clear celestial height, thy pure beaming radiance gives.
So there's no instrumental version of that song, so I had to play it with the words, and so I played it at full volume, and I made myself be quiet while you heard it. And the chorus sounds like this.
Veni Sancte Spiritus, Veni Sancte Spiritus, Veni Sancte.
And of course you can find that in the description below. I think it's called Come Holy Spirit. And the reason why I'm so familiar with that song is it was quite often, we used to do this Eucharist on Sundays back in the cult, and maybe some orders still do it. I mean, the order divided into at least 4, and some of them are probably still doing that Eucharist. It was a nice ritual. I mean, it was a ambitious idea, basically combining elements of the Catholic Mass with the opening by Watchtower ritual, and that, but in a very theatrical, dramatic way, and then performing it on, I think, the first Sunday of the month for the members, if whoever wanted to come, and guests, people who, and also when people were interested in wanting to join and they were local, then we would invite them to come to that, and so that way they would know if they wanted to say, well, thanks for the ceremony and the Catholic hosts and the Manischewitz. I think I don't need to stay for the orientation, though. I'm allergic to Catholicism. And we'd say, okay, bye. And so that helped to filter out the people who were allergic to Catholicism at the neophyte grade, so that it didn't become such an issue when they'd go all the way up to Philosophists, and then, surprise, it's John Michael Talbot, in Portal. And then they'd be like, I've dedicated my life to this for years. I've cut off friends and family. All my friends are in the order. And now you're telling me that I have to betray everything that I hold sacred and true and embrace this demiurge religion from Rome? And we'd be like, yep, sorry. Well, we were the weird ones. The traditional Golden Dawn is not so heavily Catholic. I think there was one point where the founder, the guy whose ring this is, was attending a Catholic mass, and the other adepts were asking him, like, why are you doing that? And he was like, I like the way that they revere the Virgin Mary. They honor the Shekhinah, Isis, Mighty Mother, in the form of the Virgin Mary there. And they, helped preserve the mysteries throughout so many ages. And the others just looked at him and looked at each other, and they're like, let's fucking schism. Let's start a new order. We'll call it Stella Monetina. No, that's not exactly how it went. Of course, everything's much more complicated than simple things I say on Chicken Philosophy. Okay, so we're ready. Let's read it. The Spirit. For the Father, the Exalted One, they know by His will, which is the Spirit that breathes through the members of the All, and gives them a thought to search for the unknown. Just as somebody is moved by a fragrance to seek the source of that fragrance. Have you ever seen perfume? it's related to that line, but probably a little different. Yeah, you know how there's 100 different versions of Christianity. There's 100 ways to interpret that line, and that movie is one of them. Not necessarily the best one, but it's... I'll keep reading. And the fragrance of the Father surpasses such unworthy things. Oh, we know he loves his fragrance, right? For its sweetness lets the aeons sense an indescribable pleasure. Oh, that smell. Okay. And gives them the thought that they should be united with the one who desires that they should know him in oneness. So a smell of pleasure that makes you want to become one with the Father. Well, let's just hope you're the mother, because that's the only way that's an appropriate family dynamic. Not the secretary, and certainly not the sister-in-law or anyone else that's even more appropriate than that. Sorry. And that they should assist one another through the Spirit that is sown in them. Like planted, like a seed. John Michael Talbot.
There I will plant my seed.
It's a good place to plant your seed. As good as any, I guess. Right. What? They find themselves in a great and powerful inbreathing, where they are renewed in a speechless manner, and are formed, having no occasion to turn away through thoughtlessness from that in which they are placed. If you're inside it, you can't turn away from it. Everywhere you look, the only way to turn away from it is to close your eyes. But I think even then, you would... I'll just... Right. For they do not speak, but are silent about the glory of the Father, about him who has the power to speak. Sorry, it's just Agent Smith flashback. He manifested himself. Himself is in bracket parentheses, so I think it's safe to say maybe. I'll try it without the bracket parentheses. Bracket parentheses means that word isn't in the text. It was put there by the translators to help clarify the meaning. So let's see what it's like without that helpful clarification, shall we? He manifested, though he cannot be spoken. Or, with the bracket parentheses, he manifested himself, though he cannot be spoken. I like it without the himself. It just feels more open to, not interpretation, but just more open. He manifested. He manifested. He manifested himself? What is this extra thing, this extra layer of nonsense? No. Okay. They have him, and him is they do that weird thing with the pointy, the greater than, less than used as bracket parentheses, which I'm guessing is in lieu of bold. They have him hidden in their thoughts. For that reason, the aeons keep silent about the way the Father exists in his form, his nature, and his greatness. But they have become worthy of knowing this through his Spirit, with a capital S. By the way, ruach, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, is usually gets translated as spirit, though it can also mean breath. Ruach HaKadosh, I believe, is Holy Spirit. So, holy breath is another way of translating that. So, but I mean, in Latin, it's funny to think about. Latin was a language that was already very well established, and it was the language of a village. So there was this village, right, called Rome, right? It wasn't a city, it wasn't a town, it was a village. It was an ancient village. A village where the rich were people who had horses. People who knew the secrets of feeding and taking care of horses. They had this secret knowledge, and they had a horse. So these folks, most of the people didn't have horses, right? Seems reasonable, right? So the upper class, the ones with the horses. Anyway, that's the beginning of knights and shit, and aristocracy. So according to the legend, which probably is rooted in some reality, truth, I don't know, it's hard to say. But the story goes that they started conquering the neighboring villages and taking the daughters of people, rude. I mean, kind of consider that's like how Joshua was behaving in the old Tanakh, but he was doing it in the name of God, I take the virgins in the name of God, but don't take any gold. Anyway, so the Romans, they were taking the gold too, whatever, they didn't care. And then, but, the way that it worked out was all the neighboring surrounding villages were like, fuck these Romans, right? We've got to do something about this. And so they all got together and they're like, we're going to go in, we're going to just make it an unhappy day for those Romans, and we're going to get our daughters back. And so then they came into Rome to seize it and attack it, and they all saw their daughters coming out with babies and smiling with their husbands. Stockholm syndrome, right? And so then they were like, well, shit, we can't attack you. They're like, please don't harm the father of my child. What would I do without it's his father. He's a good man. I mean, he did a little looting and pillaging and all that back a little more than 9 months ago, at least, right? So Rome ended up with this alliance with all the neighboring villages because of how that happened, or how that's the story anyway. And then that gradually evolved into a kingdom, and then that gradually evolved into a republic, which devolved back into, an empire. And, so they're doing empire stuff. So their language evolved to be like talking about politics, talking about, pillaging and, ruling, dominating, organization, and all of this stuff. And then, meanwhile, in Judea, Palestine, whatever you want to call it, by whatever name I call thee, thou art nameless unto eternity, right? The Holy Land, they call it, right? Many people call it. Different people call it. Different angles. An Abrahamic Holy Land, I think it's safe to say. I think most Hindus are like, yeah, I don't see the holy part of that. Well, no. I guess they have the enemy of my enemy thing going, so they got an alliance. Ugh. Anyway, sorry. If anybody's monitoring my videos, don't take my ugh as any kind of dissent. I live in India, if you didn't know. What am I talking about? I don't know. Yeah, so when they had to translate, the Tanakh and the Christian scriptures into Latin, there, it's like fitting round pegs in square holes. So you have a Hebrew word like leolam, very simple word, and then so they're like, how do we translate that into Latin using Latin words that already existed in Latin before they decided to start talking about these Abrahamic ideas, these Hebrew-based ideas. And so they came up with secula seculorum. It's like these long words. It's sort of repetitive. Forever and ever and unto the ages of ages is how it got translated into English. So there's a lot of examples of that. But yeah, Spiritus Sanctus. Okay. Sanctus being like, separate, something that's separated. All right. Kadesh. I don't think Kadesh is exactly like Sanctus, but so the basis of Christianity, then translated into English. So then continue to misunderstand these ideas for 2,000 years, and then, or let's say 500 years, and then translate it into Old English, and then have English evolve from that, and you end up with the idea of the Holy Spirit in the colloquial minds of Protestant Christians and ex-Protestant Christians and the descendants of ex-Protestant Christians, and I don't know. Well, I mean, not just Protestants, obviously Catholics too. I don't know if any of that was useful or interesting or important. What? His greatness they make, for he is unnameable and inaccessible.
All you've got is a small moment. 21st century's yesterday.
I think they were going for the in excess, INXS. They were going for like in excess, like too much of a good thing. It's the 80s, like everybody's a yuppie or whatever. But inaccessible, little bit of a homophone situation happening ish. Sorry. For he is unnameable and inaccessible, but through the Spirit, which is the trace by which he may be sought, he gives himself to them to be taught and spoken, to be thought and spoken. All right. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty consistent with generally Christian ideas, right? This is one of the ones that it just seems like it's just missing from, maybe there were one or two things that weren't perfectly in line with what they were going for in the early church, the early established church, I mean. Orthodox church. Orthodox means like we're right. It's basically accurate or correct. And so unorthodox literally means incorrect. But, like who's correct according to whom? Huh? According to the Orthodox. What? Anyway. Orthodox Christians, I mean. So the Orthodox Catholics, there were the Catholics were the Catholics and the Orthodox used to be the same thing. And then after 1,000 years, they split. I mean, by they, I mean East and West. The Pope and Rome and Spain and all that shit went one way, and the rest of the world went the other way. And then over time, one became known as Roman Catholic, the other one became known as Greek Orthodox, but there is also Russian Orthodox and Syrian Orthodox and all kinds of Orthodox. For each of the aeons is a name corresponding to each of the Father's qualities and powers. So for the aeon of Pisces, I'm mixing ideas. For the aeon of Horus, I mean the eight. So what's this one? The aeon of David Koresh. Who's the god that is? Time will tell.
Time has told.
Since he exists in many names, it is by mingling and through mutual harmony that they are able to speak of him by means of a richness of speech. Thus the Father is a single name because he is one, but nevertheless innumerable in his qualities and names. Cool. Let's bring up the tree of life. So the starting at the top, the yellow, the white one, the name of God for that one is Eheye, meaning I will be, commonly translated as I am. The one for the gray one is Yah, as in Jah. Long-time viewers remember. Editor Edward, let's show that clip. The divine name Yah, or as some folks pronounce it, Jah. Yes. Right, so that's Yah, and then Yod He Vav He Elohim, Tetragrammaton Elohim, Yahweh Elohim, if you're a heretic, and then the blue one is El, also known as Allah. Allah, ilimde Allah, zikrimde Allah, fikrimde Allah, aklımda Allah, aşkımda Allah, aslımda Allah, kanımda Allah. Yeah, so that's the same thing, El Allah, and they both are the same as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and Adonai and every other name of God. So when people talk about the Muslim God, I mean, okay, they could be making a commentary talking about how the voice in the Quran seems to be a little different from the voice in the Tanakh when God is talking. But I don't know, a lot of that could be down to the prophets, I mean, like which prophet, because like if you compare God talking when it's Jesus versus Jeremiah or versus Ezekiel or whatever, you might also notice some differences. So yeah, that's a concept called, I love this concept. My friend, my old friend, my Dedao house in my neophyte initiation. Well, now I'm bound by oath not to tell you his name, but I'll call him Thomas. Just call him Thomas. He had a lot of tattoos. And he told me about this concept called stained glass. I mean, obviously we know about stained glass windows. That's not the concept. I mean, but it is. It's a metaphor. So in other words, when it's a question of, is it real? If someone is saying, I am channeling an archangel, I am channeling a divine presence, I am channeling God, here is what God says. The idea is that they might be just straight up making it up, talking out their butt, or channeling something else, something unsavory even. Or they're channeling the real thing. But 99.9 infinity percent of the time, they're doing it through one or another degree of stained glassing. It's a stained glassed message. In other words, their ego, you might say, their cultural conditioning, you might say, or both, their personal philosophy, their personal religion, their personal conclusions, their pre-existing biases, all form what could metaphorically be described as a stained glass window that for some is going to look like Christianity, for others is going to look like Hinduism, for others is going to look like the Theosophical Society, some kind of classic New Age dogma like that, So, like when they're getting a message, okay, here's the message. The message is, this is a message from the ascended Master Jesus, not to be confused with the Son of God Jesus, that those false people, like, they'll leave that part out. They'll just leave that unspoken. Like the cosmic Christ presence ascended Master Jesus is speaking through me now, and he says, tie your shoes, or whatever. And so they're identifying what their stained glass is before they speak. Whereas someone else would say, the Son of God himself, through the Holy Spirit or whatever, is speaking now, and he says, tie your goddamn shoes. Like the message might be a little different depending on what the stained glass window is like, where someone else would say, Krishna says, tie your shoes, So there might really be a message saying, tie your shoes, coming from really, a divine source. But everybody's gonna put it in a little bit of a different term depending on how they're stained glassing it. So there's a concept that I'm quite happy to have put out there a little more than I did on that one blog post back in 2011-ish, whenever that was. All right, the nature of emission is up next. So you can look forward to that, and it'll be Gwydion reading it, so you know that he's going to be absolutely appropriate and not make any innuendos about the idea of a divine emission. It's what happens after you smell the perfume, become one. Then there's the divine emission, then the divine cigarette, and then one of them passes out, or both, depending on the... We know the father's a boy, right? So he passes out after the divine emission. And then you might have to read a book for an hour until you get sleepy. So that'll be next time. That'll be next time on Nag Hammadi when we get to part 17. And Editor Edward, go ahead and play the thing that we didn't play at the beginning of the episode.
You are 16, going on 17.
Okay, Sound of Music, don't be weird. All right, yeah, I didn't want to open with that. I wanted to like ease in, let give a false sense of security to the new folk before we started getting into the weird stuff. All right, but like speaking on a more short term, next time it's going to be Edward reading Martin Luther, and it's Martin Luther, but at least it's Edward reading Martin Luther, so it won't be like Gwydion reading Martin Luther. That's like a basic magnetic repelling that they've got going. Gwydion and Martin Luther, probably because Gwydion is just like Martin Luther. If Martin Luther were talking about like some other person in his past, then he'd be like, fucking what? Why do you mean by this? How do they get? And then fast forward, you have Gwydion reading Martin Luther going, what the fuck? How do you? There are many differences, I think, between Gwydion and Martin Luther, but there are some marked similarities, hence his shadow allergy that he's still working on processing. Well, that and Martin Luther's kind of fucked. By today's standards, by a rational person's standards today, especially one who's observed the effect of exoteric Christianity on the American this insanity. In certain forms. And a lot of them are nice. A lot of them are very nice. I once attended the Episcopal Church up on Lake, which I'm sure is, I don't know how close that is to all the fire damage, but it looks like a kind of like a medieval, it has like a King Arthur kind of vibe, but like a Disney King Arthur vibe, like if you went to Disneyland and they were like, come to our new King Arthur section, and if you saw this Episcopal church, you'd be like, oh, that makes sense, and plus all the these and thous and stuff, and I got the feeling that everybody there like went to the Renaissance Fair and was a Lord of the Rings nut, and then the priest got up there and was talking about how white men in authority like himself need to take a long look within and stuff like that. They were talking about stuff like that. They're woke Protestant Christians going on. I don't know if all Episcopal Christians are like that, but I know my friend Matthew is a good guy. I don't know if he'd appreciate me calling him woke, but he's definitely probably left-leaning in his politics. I think, yeah, he went up. I hope he doesn't mind. I'm going to show a picture of my old friend protesting the pipeline a few years back. So that's a friend of mine who's an archbishop, and he's a good guy. And so I'm not talking about 100% of all American Protestants when I talk about the damage done by the philosophy of Martin Luther, but others like I don't know, like QAnon. Like there's elements of, it's twisted. It's like intentionally twisted. The modern sort of new the prosperity gospel, Trump thumpers. Oh, did I coin that? Oh, Not Bible thumpers, but Trump thumpers. It rhymes. It has alliteration or something. One of those consonants, or with a CE, one of those poetic devices, or something along those lines. Okay, I guess that's it. I guess we're done for today. Until next time.